What it do, Rockets fans? This is Rockets recap. Game 7 loss to the hated Golden State Warriors. I'll try to be brief. Just have to get some stuff off my chest. Um, really speak my mind. Um, just a few things. I guess first and foremost, um, Jalen just Jalen wasn't going through an entire series and having a 7 game series and having only one Jalen Green game where Jalen left an imprint on the game, good, a good imprint on the game is sad. The team has spent countless hours, countless resources, ignored players. We spent seasons, like multiple seasons, um, developing or spending time developing him to the detriment of other people. Like these are reps that we'll never get back in Shingun's development, Cam's development, Reed's development, um, Bari, Amen, all those players. Um, lost on ball reps to Jalen. Um, he was just, and I think was most telling, is that when there were multiple spaces in the game where Ime chose like lineups like Fred and Tari Bari, Adams, and I don't even know Dylan, something like that, and like uh, you, it's obvious that you had no offensive punch in those stretches, and still no Jalen. And Jalen's an improved defender. So it wasn't due to defensive purposes that he wasn't out there. It's because Ime didn't trust his offense and it probably didn't trust his handles. He didn't expect him to give him any more. I'm gonna get to Ime in a minute, but he didn't expect much from Jalen. I think he lost faith in Jalen. Um, on so many levels, this was foreseeable. On so many levels, this was preventable by the front office and by the coaching staff. And they chose to continue to empower, to overlook, to um, whatever with Jalen. At any point in time, they could have chosen to put him to, change his role, to make him 6 man, to make him the third option, whatever the case may be, right? Any point in time. Um, you know, before the trade deadline, bring in another, somebody else that's a little bit more well equipped, a little steadier handle, a little bit more veteran savvy presence. Any point in time could have made that happen. Nope, nope. And I think it does. I think it did a disservice to Jalen just as much as it did a disservice to the team. What did we gain? You know what I'm saying? Like they keep saying data, data, data. Like you see this all on the timeline. Like, hey, we got data. Yay! We knew this stuff. We knew Jalen was inconsistent. We knew, like at least I knew just by watching this game that he didn't have a go-to anything. He didn't. There weren't any scenarios where you think, okay, this is Jalen's shot, right? This is something that if Jalen can get to it, he'll hit it more often than not. Um, and that's a problem. And this is year 4 or 5 or whatever it is. You should have something that you're trying to get to when the chips are down. Whatever you should be like. The team should be able to depend on you if you can get to your stuff. And he don't have any stuff, and that's the problem. It's fundamentally a problem. Um, I don't mind him being back, but if he's gonna be back, he needs a different role. He cannot be your tip of the spear. He can't be your 1A guy. Um, no matter how you look at it, excuse me, no matter how you look at it, and that chapter should be closed. Um, I understand the team has invested a lot, so if they want to bring him back, I said this last pod. I understand, I get it, but he cannot be your A+ guy. Just cannot. Ime Udoka. Ime Udoka. I guess first thing that I want to say, um, there are two sides of there are two big aspects of the game: offense and defense. Right? You cannot win a basketball game if you ignore one side of the court. Period. Um, multiple is like not even just in the micro sense of this game, but like his whole tenure in Houston has been a what's the word I'm looking for? It's been a case study in how far can you go if you just focus on defense. If your offense is really just ISO, no hierarchy, always we, always us, whatever. If that's gonna be the philosophy, how far can you go? Just you have an amazing defense, like what E-Man accomplished defensively with a bunch of players that really aren't great defenders. Dylan Brooks has lost a step. Fred VanVleet is small, like all this stuff, and to have top whatever 5 defense, 10 defense, and bring it from where it was to where it is, amazing. With that being said, um, like D'Antoni would when during the Harden years, then when the chips were down, it was just like run, do the little ISO Harden kick, through, and there was never a like I need to change this because or at least have some versatility, some other things that we can lean on when these things aren't hitting, and it's the same thing with Ime, but his defense. Like we have multiple defensive schemes. Like he can, again, he's a great defensive tactician. But offense, there's nothing to lean on. There's no creativity. There's no versatility. There's no variability. It's just good. It just grows. Um, it is hard to imagine a scenario where we win a championship with Emi Udoka as the head coach if uh, there's no change in his approach. At least get a rock star offensive assistant. Um, I don't know what Mike Brown is doing, but he was a coach of an amazing offense in Sacramento. So whatever, but something got to give in that regard. If you ever want to be, ever like we have a ceiling, like we have a definitive ceiling, like this team is second round fodder, like the way it's composed and the way it's coached, and Ime has to evolve, and he's still a young coach. Like it's easy for you, but he's still a young coach. Ime has to evolve if the goal is to be greater than that. What he did with the team, amazing. To go from where we were to where we are, like no one can take that away from him. He did an amazing job. But this next step is critical. You have a defensive foundation. You have, you found something with the double big. You have, amazing Swiss Army knife, the defensive, especially defensive player, Amen Thompson. Um, you have, some good, some additional good defensive wings in Barry and Tari, assuming there's no big trade. You have a core, a defensive core, and defensive principles that you can lean on and rely on, and that's going to be there. What do you do to augment and to change and to grow the offense? Um, I will keep beating this drum until this person's just players traded, but there's no logical reason for Cam Whitmore to rot on the bench when the team is so awful offensively. Um, you can coach him, and I should have mentioned this in the last pod, but there's a clip with Mike Tomlin, the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, talking about coaching, and how um, being a coach, like send him all the players with issues, like mental, like when there's a technique issues or mentality issues, maturity issues, all that stuff. Send him those players because coaching involves like a good coach, a coach that doesn't run from coaching, will work to develop those players. And he doesn't run from coaching. He doesn't run from the discomfort of dealing with a problem player. Um, and I feel like Ime runs from the coaching in some respects, right? Um, and I don't know the details, and it's not the time to speculate. But he did the team a disservice by putting all his chips in the Jalen Green basket, um, by not developing a plan B in that regard. He really did his team a disservice, really legitimately. If you don't want it, if you Cam ain't got it to you, then read somebody that's an that's an offensive spark. Because really the only player that you have that was consistently giving you like an offense was Shingun, and leaning on him with no, um, you know, they're reliable, I guess, um, offensive player was Shingun, and you need a perimeter pairing with him. Um, and unless you just were just wholeheartedly convinced that Jalen wasn't gonna have any more issues, um, again, I think that by the end of the series, like coaches lost faith in him. But if you weren't convinced that Jalen was, going to consistently be your guy, you should have been developing Cam every step of the way. Original sin in my eyes, um, and there's a good chance that Cam won't be here next year, and you know that's an opportunity just gone at the altar of Jalen Green. So um, Shingun needs to develop a J for the Draymond Greens of the world. Um, I think I appreciate the heart that he played with. He got fouled so many times. The officiating crew, the from a possession to possession basis, was just bad. Like they were fine in like they didn't there weren't any horrendous like type of situations, but there were a lot of missed free throws and over time in a game with two opponents that are pretty evenly matched. That stuff over time in the aggregate it adds up. Um, but again, he needs to develop a J. His defense was really good, but his offense wasn't as good as sharp as it could have been. Not all his fault. Just for the record, a lot of times in a lot of instances, we got the ball to him late, in a bad position. Local, shot clock running down, easy to double team him, all that stuff. So at least he emptied the clip and he tried, but it wasn't his best night. And like Draymond Green's a Hall of Famer. Probably top 10 defender, the defender in NBA history. So that wasn't going to be easy, period. But the fact that he struggled a bit really did cost us in this game. Wasn't his best game. Fred didn't have it. I mean, he was all right, but it wasn't like a Fred carry us to victory night. Dylan was bad. Not his, like pretty much everybody outside of Amen was bad. And once Amen was good. Once he kind of got his head screwed on straight, I think somewhere in the third quarter, he was legit. But he has so many limitations in his game. Handles aren't great. Jump shots not great. So defense is cool, but as said, as outlined before, you have to have more going offensively if you're trying to win big in the NBA. Um, so moving forward, briefly, in about 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, will the draft lottery will occur. And quiet as it's kept, that's a really big inflection point for this team. If we get in the top four, which is possible, not probable, but possible, Um, what do you do? There are a lot of players in that top four that could kind of possibly be what we hope Jalen was, right? There's a possibility there. Um, you have some score. Excuse me. You have some potential scores in those top four picks. Um, some guys with the hypothetical talent, skill set that Jalen had, or was supposed to have. But do you look to replace that in the draft, or do you trade? What players would be available? Um, I'm of the mind that Giannis would cause you to need would require a fundamental change in what the team is. So I'm not really super high on that trade. Trey fits. Trey makes a lot of sense in my mind. Um, who else off the top of my head that might be on the market? LaMelo. If there's a possibility of him being moved. Um, really, obviously KD, obviously Devin Booker, but any forward or guard that can shoot makes sense for this team and need to be considered. Um, and especially if the cost is Jalen Green and a pick or two. Um, it's just time. It's just time. Gave Jalen all the benefit of the doubt. Um, Disappointed Ime, and it's really time to for the team to grow up, and for the front office to grow up, and for the coaching staff to grow up. Teams every year make moves to put their team in the best position to win, right? And Houston didn't do that, and they know they didn't do that. Like it's very like they made the choice to not shore up the gaps on the team, and that cost them big time. Like this series was a winnable series, and they chose not to win it due to faith in Jalen Green, due to it largely ignoring the offense, due to not adding shooters. Um, it was obvious that this was going to be the fate, whether it came in the first round or not. Offense was just terrible. Jalen Green was too inconsistent. And I don't want to say that to the because people say, well, you act like Jalen Green's the only one with flaws. No, he's not the only one with flaws. Like again, Sengun needs to learn how to shoot. um, Amen needs to learn how to shoot. Barr needs to learn how to dribble. Tari, um, he mentally he just needs to mature his game. Reed, Reed needs to learn how to play defense. Cam needs to grow up, mature a little bit. The whole team, needs to continue to grow from here. But Jalen has had the trust and the faith and every opportunity at this point. To me, it's done. It's done. In the front office, they gained the front office and the coaching staff. Understand, hey, you need time to implement the culture, to, defensive philosophy, all that stuff. This is it. Playing with the big boys now. You got the second seed. Took the Warriors to 7 games. Great. You got to build from here. And that requires problem solving. That requires knowing what you already, because you don't need. I didn't need data. I knew Jalen at some point was gonna fail. I hoped he didn't, But to me, it was obvious that this was coming. And we should have been planning for it along the way. To me, it was obvious that the offense was flawed. Non-existent, quite frankly. Offensive philosophy, non-existent. And we should have been planning for it along the way. Shooting, non-existent. We should have been planning for it along the way. And we chose no data, no this, no that. It's over. The fans are going to start expecting more of y'all from now on. So it's time. Grow up. Get big. The expectations don't change. They get higher. They don't get lower. So for all the players, the coaches, front office, it's time. Good learning experience. Good data procured. Now let's see what you do from here. This next step, we are like a couple baby steps under like the James Harden era, like kind of Rockets, like, you know, that we, as far as like where our ceiling is, I guess. But we're not too far, right? Like this is kind of the early Harden, like when they Parsons and Lynn and all that stuff. All those players were still around. Like we're kind of in that phase. And what they essentially did was kind of tweak the supporting cast and then roll the ball out, and you know, like that's basically all they did for the Harden era. And we're transitioning from the we're just happy to be here to now we need to be a contender phase, right? And that's hard. Those steps are hard. Those steps at those tweaks at the margin, those players that you acquire for a couple seconds at the trade deadline, all that stuff that we were just largely ignoring up until this point, has now become what has to be done well in order for us to succeed. Time to get big. And on that note, I'm gonna crash out. I'm tired, emotionally drained, but I'm hopeful. We know what we know. So I expect big things from this team going forward. Peace and hair grease. One love.